maybe 30% joking, 70% truthful, was just like, I'd quit. I'm not going back. I'm never going back. And
it's kind of like a drug dealer setting you up with very cheap drugs in the beginning, and then you get hooked and dependent on it. And
we're getting away with murder right now. We're spending $200 a month and building, what would otherwise cost us 10 employees. And
the top model from Anthropic is not publicly available, and now the top model from OpenAI is not available, which is scary.
I'm curious what your read on the AI model landscape is right now, both from a software engineering, from a positive, from a constructive lens, as well as possible threat vectors or security risks that we should be aware of.
Well, I don't think anything qualitatively has changed since we last spoke. Obviously, the models have gotten better. The harnesses have gotten better. We at Start9 have recognized, order of magnitude productivity increases since, the Opus 4.6, 4.5 drop. We've put an enormous amount of effort into automating all the things, right? Dedicated agents for dedicated tasks, interacting with each other. I, at this point, manage a fleet of AIs. Most of my day is spent with, 5 different Claude code sessions, and that's it. We're building at 5 times the speed that we could have pre this era, and I'm having a hard time imagining my life without it at this point. I was talking with Aiden about that the other day. We were like, what if, what if for some reason this was just a dream and it disappeared? Like, what would we do? And I, maybe 30% joking, 70% truthful, was just like, I'd quit. I'm not going back. I'm never going back. And it's a very dangerous kind of headspace to be in a sense, because what it means is that they're undercharging, right? What it means is that like the current models and compute are being heavily subsidized, and absent, ongoing aggressive competition, especially from the open source sector, this will not be a cost savings in the long run. They will fleece us for all we're worth. So it's really, really important to keep the open models pushing, and hopeful that one company or an oligarchy of a few companies backed by government power don't monopolize this thing and gouge the rest of the world for it, because it is an essential technology that everyone needs at this point. Again, it's hard to imagine going back. It's like electricity. Like we're not going back. We can't go back.
I'm curious, before I come to Odell here, if you're starting to do any more kind of local inference as well. We talked a lot about how at the time it was just so powerful that you kind of hold your nose, and if we're handing over some information in the meantime, it's too great of a tool not to. I'm curious if you started to push to using some models for simpler tasks and running them locally, or what you're kind of thinking from the implications of what you're sharing from the Start9 work.
Yeah, so we take a multi-pronged approach, right? You build in the moment and you plan for the future, a combination of expense and investment. So we are investing a lot into self-hosting, obviously, right? But for example, we still use GitHub as our primary, Git layer, and that is a disaster waiting to happen. And we are aggressively making moves towards self-hosting all of our repositories and using GitHub as a mirror at best. But the reason I mention that is because it's like we're 7 years in to being a, company that promotes and builds self-hosting tools, and we're still using GitHub, right? So what that says is that we are not dogmatic about the process, right? It's not like you need to get where you want to be instantly, right? It's a process. And you identify the things that are most important first, right? The largest threat models and attack vectors first, and work your way down to the lesser important. Also eliminating costs first, right? So the things that hurt the most are the things that you fix first, wherever the biggest fire is. And so we're taking the same approach to AI, of course. And so there are obvious, huge outsized benefits and competitive advantages to using the frontier models on the Anthropic servers and not using them. I understand if someone wants to take a principled stance on that and just is like, I'm not using them, but they are in a way signing their own death certificate. You got to compete. You have to stay up. But at the same time, you don't want to become dependent You don't want to set yourself up for a future attack vector. And so we are building out local infrastructure as well. We have 2 DGX Sparks that we use for company matters and smaller tasks. We have self-designed harnesses. So, we built our own custom harness that we use that allows us to, maybe don't tell them, but, we run our entire company on a Claude Max plan of $200 a month. We don't use the API. We circumvented the restrictions that they put in place, possibly in violation of their terms of service. To be honest, I don't really know because I haven't read them or handed them to a lawyer, but I know that that the way that we are using their Max plan is not the way that they want us to be using it. We're basically pretending to be a human, but it's not. And so, we're getting away with murder right now. We're spending $200 a month and building, what would otherwise cost us 10 employees. And we know we're not going to get away with that forever. So that custom harness has a fail-safe and fallback already built such that not only can we fall back to API usage in an emergency if we need to, but we can also fall back to local inference if we need to as well. But obviously that would come at a huge penalty of productivity.
No, 100%. Odell, I'm curious your thoughts on all this, and in particular, even the open source versus the frontier models, both from a usability and kind of user control, and also the open source implications of using the tools to build open source tech, if that makes sense.
First and foremost, as the largest investor in Start9, I'm constantly impressed at Matt's resourcefulness in saving money and running a lean operation. So that's fantastic to hear. I didn't realize they were doing that. But I do think, he touched on a key piece here, right? Which is right now, specifically with the proprietary frontier models, right? And specifically Anthropic and OpenAI, we live in a world where they're heavily subsidized. And I think what's going to be really interesting is, it's kind of like a drug dealer setting you up with very cheap drugs in the beginning, and then you get hooked and dependent on it. And a lot of people will probably get wrecked in that transitionary period. I think with that comes opportunity. A lot of people will be able to transition effectively and keep their token costs down and be able to use these things in a relatively free way. And those people will find success. But I think a lot of people are getting hooked kind of on this, this cheap intelligence maxing, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, what do we want to see? First of all, we want to see the open source models and the open weight models specifically become more competitive with the frontier models. They have not yet. I think there's a lot of hype out there. Influencers, it's you get a lot of engagement on X if you say, GLM 5.2 is basically Opus quality, or Fable. They even go even further. They're like, oh, this is like basically Fable 5 and super cheap. That's not the case. It's not true. And so that's one piece. I think the other piece is, OpenAI just recently announced that they're coming out with 5.6, which is their latest model. And that the government requested that they don't release it publicly yet. So that's the second time we've seen this. Now there's the top model from Anthropic is not publicly available, and now the top model from OpenAI is not available, which is scary. I think that's a dark route for our country to go in if we want our country to be leading on the AI front. So that's a development that I'm watching closely. And then,
the last on that note, Odell, I wanted to double click on that. Why do you think that is? For me, I wonder, it almost feels like if we're just creating some sort of hype, like they're so incredible, we can't release this. The movie's so scary, people are fainting and having heart attacks. What do you think is the motivation behind keeping these behind a closed wall?
Look, it's a little bit too early, I think, to make a definitive call. With Anthropic first, they kind of did it to themselves. They kept saying this is basically a weapon of mass destruction. And they also they weren't on good terms with the US government. So it kind of made sense both from the US government point of view, let's fuck these people that are not playing ball with us. And then it made sense from the Anthropic side, which is oh, it's great marketing. We have this model that is so good that is too dangerous for you to have as the average person. So I didn't want to put too much mental bandwidth in that, and I wanted to see how it developed. But now having it happen to OpenAI at the same time, I think you're starting to see a little bit of a trend, and so it's something that I think we should be watching. I think this is a tendency with regulators with all new technology, right? They want to try and keep it in a box. They think like if they can control it, then they'll have more power and more influence, and usually it backfires. I mean, this is why open source software and open protocols are so important, because nobody can control them, and they're viral in nature. But I mean, to that point, like the thing that'll be really interesting is I'm not sold on the idea of people buying hardware right now yet. Like I think it obviously makes sense from like a freedom and sovereignty and privacy point of view. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense from a cost point of view. And part of that is me coming from the Bitcoin lens is like, we haven't even really hit like the ASIC hardware revolution yet of models. Like I think, and hardware, like I think a lot of people that aped into GPUs or early ASICs on Bitcoin ended up getting absolutely wrecked from a financial point of view. So I do caution. I think that if people are thinking about this, they should be very clear to themselves. Like, I'm not making this necessarily for a financial investment. I'm making this for a freedom investment. And that to me makes sense. But for the average person, especially on small business side, being able to just adapt on the fly to different APIs and not get locked into like a vertically integrated Claude setup or vertically integrated Codex setup, and being able to switch and adapt, I think is the key differentiator that will set you up for success.
Odell, would you say that my purchase of an M5 Max with 128 gigs of RAM was a local top then?
I don't know. Not yet. It's not a local top yet because Apple just announced they're raising prices, right? Yeah, I think people who bought like Mac Studios and decked out MacBooks like 2 months ago are right now sitting on a better deal than if they bought them today. But I think it's important to think in longer than 6-month timelines. And I question where we're going to be in 12 to 18 months. And whether or not people are going to regret paying $10,000 for a Mac Studio because they thought they were setting up their family for generational intelligence when the thing is already outdated.
The one other thing I was going to ask you, you were mentioning kind of the open versus closed models and kind of where we're at. I wonder if either of you actually could comment on what kind of threw me for a loop with all this stuff was what I considered counterintuitive tactics of the West leaning into the closed models and China leading into more of the open models. Why do you think that manifested? What do you think were the factors there?
Speculating on, international politics, information age wartime strategy. Look, if you're lagging, you're going to try to poke at the beast any way that you can. I mean, undermining the West's hegemony on frontier models in any way that you can. I mean, open source, in a way, does ruin business models, right? Certain business models. And so China might not be trying to win. They might just be trying to make sure that we don't. Maybe, right? So yeah, I mean, I will follow on a little bit of what Matt was saying as well. We live in the information age, okay? A lot of critical infrastructure and personal security and survivability depend on digital systems. And when you have tools that are capable of causing massive disruption to digital systems, it would make sense from a government, right, the US government's vantage point, to treat them like weapons. There exists in the world today killer drones and biological weapons and chemical weapons and nuclear weapons, and we do not have access to those things, right? In fact, pursuing access to those things is considered criminal or treasonous behavior. And I don't see why they would treat intelligence of mass destruction any differently. Now, I think they should, obviously, right? I think that it is a losing battle to try to contain this. It's not like mining uranium and building nuclear weapons that, requires an enormous amount of real world meat space, activity. And but it's going to be a lot easier, I think, to compete or to make available super intelligence to smaller entities, even individuals. and that it can't be contained, but they're going to try, right? It makes sense that they're going to try. We have, in my opinion,